Hello everyone, welcome back to the Card Combo Show. I am back. I'm also quite a bit more tired, but you know, that's just the way it goes when you have a baby. Anyway, let's get back into the swing of things, shall we? I should be able to put these videos back out on a weekly basis, as well as deck profiles and some streams and who knows what else. Anyway, this week I'm going to be looking at Onion Knight from Opus 17. Well, they're all from Opus 17. Garland, Quon, Durando, and finally Princess Sarah. Right, first up we have Onion Knight, 2 CP 5k win forward. With the text, when Onion Knight enters the field, choose one forward. It gains this forward cannot attack or block until the end of the turn. And then dull, return Onion Knight to its owner's hand, play one forward across 3 or 4 from your hand onto the field. So, a pretty cool ability actually. Being able to just flash something in on your opponent's turn at any point is really cool. And it's got the nice additional effect of making something not be able to attack or block. Not be able to attack is a little weird. Because, I mean, unless you're flashing this card in, then it's not going to be attack anyway. I mean, you might be able to make it so that you can make your own forwards not have to attack, so if a forward has to attack, then you make it so it doesn't, but, you know, whatever. Right, so, Gabranth, being able to give Onion Knight Brave, so it can attack, hopefully push through opponent damage, and then use Onion Knight to then flash something else in after the attack has gone through, but maybe still in your attack phase. So you can then flash in a forward that has an ability to then, I don't know, give something else haste, or make it so, you know, whatever. Just be able to use its ability upon entry. Go-Go, so yeah, use Onion Knight to play a forward of 3 or 4 onto the field. Go-Go mimics that effect, and you get to do it twice, which is really good. And what's even better is the fact that Onion Knight obviously puts itself back in its hand, which is part of the payment. Obviously you can't then replay Onion Knight because it's a forward of only 2 or 3, but it means that you obviously have more cards in hand, which is always nice. And yeah, just being able to play 2 forwards onto the field for dulling and putting Onion Knight back in hand is pretty good. Barbarissia. So again, being able to do this during attack phases, both your opponent and your own, is quite nice. So maybe your opponent's attacking with something huge, you block with something small, and then use Onion Knight to bring in Barbarissia, who can then make that forward only 1,000 power. Not too bad. Ace, so this is a weird one. So if a card is put from the break zone in any situation, remove it from the game instead, and when Ace enters the field, discard your entire hand. You can only cast up to 2 cards per turn, and you can cast it forward from your break zone. So he's got a weird, sorry, I know I said that all in a weird order, I was looking for a specific ability, which turned out to be the penultimate one. So you can only cast 2 cards per turn when Ace is on the field, and if you were to discard from hand to pay for that card, then those discarded cards get removed from the game. Because if they're put into the break zone for any reason, they're removed. So don't play Ace with Onion Knight, because if you do so, you then have to discard your entire hand. Onion Knight puts itself back into your hand, so you then have to discard it, at which point then it gets removed, so that'd be silly. But Onion Knight is a way to be able to play other forwards onto the field. Because you can only cast 2 cards per turn, it means that you're limited in how many things you'll be able to play, or cast. But you're limited on the amount of things you can cast, but not the things you can play. So you can use things like Onion Knight to be able to play them onto the field, because something that is played is not cast, but something that is cast is also played. Confusing, I know, but yeah, just a nice way to be able to play more things onto the field whilst still adhering to Ace's restriction. Yuna, so put Onion Knight back in your hand to then bring in Yuna. Hopefully you get the damage 5, you get to then reactivate all your backups, which is nice, again in attack phase, because then you can maybe use some additional abilities which you previously couldn't have. But if you're at 5 damage, you can also bring in a Guardian, well you can do that anyway, but bring in a Guardian as well as reactivating all your backups, and then also getting the plus 2k buff to all your Guardians as well. So yeah, being able to bring in a forward, probably Oren, and then reactivating all your backups, as well as gaining unit as a forward, just from dulling Onion Knight is really good, and especially on your opponent's turn, maybe they're trying to do something, and you can see that they're going to target one of your forwards. You can Onion Knight to bring in unit to bring in Oren, so then they'll have to pick Oren, might screw their plans a bit. Alphino, similar sort of thing. So you get to draw 2 cards and discard 1, which is fine. But ultimately, you get to play a forward, of course, forward from your break zone onto the field. So again, attack phase, it doesn't matter when it happens. Onion Knight back to hand to then play Alphino to then hopefully get a forward from the break zone onto the field, as well as drawing 2 cards and discarding 1. So yeah, you could also just discard the Onion Knight that you just put back in your hand because you just want to draw those 2 cards. So it's a nice way to also fund Alphino's discard. Faris. So, I mean, just being able to trigger Faris's ability to be able to deal damage on entry by playing Warriors of Light onto the field isn't too bad, but also Onion Knight is a Warrior Light, so he will trigger Faris's effects. But yeah, being able to maybe have Faris already on the field and in, again, your opponent's attack phase, use Onion Knight to then maybe play something like Lena to then pay 2 crystals, to then play more things out of your break zone, to then keep on triggering Faris, and yeah, maybe you play Lena who plays, I don't know, Sol and Dusk, who then play more things, and all these times triggering Faris, which when they resolve will deal stupid amounts of damage or just reduce the cost of your next Warrior Light by, again, stupid amounts. And Onion Knight gets to put itself back in your hand, sorry, which means you can then replay it, again, re-triggering Faris. Not too shabby. Edge and Onion Knight is also a ninja, so if you have Edge on the field, you can play Onion Knight for only 1 CP and with any element, which is nice, but also it's a nice way, well, Onion Knight is a nice way to be able to color fix, because Edge, and you might not have Edge on the field, but you've got the backups down, but not the right elements to be able to play a forward in your hand. Having Onion Knight down means you can put him back in your hand to then replay, or to be able to play a forward of an element you don't currently have. So a nice way to be able to color fix. But also, Onion Knight putting itself back in your hand is nice because you can keep on replaying it for pretty cheap, which keeps on giving Edge shurikens. Bartandalus, so you go to, maybe your opponent wants to end their turn, you then play, or use Onion Knight to then play Bartandalus onto the field, and if they have any active backups, if they don't use them at the end of their main phase 2, they will then become dull and frozen. So it's a nice little way to be able to kind of screw with your opponent's field a bit. They might wanted to keep those backups open for your turn to be able to stop you from doing stuff. You play Bartandalus onto the field, now they are forced to use those backups, otherwise they're gone. Zeramus, similar sort of thing as well. Your opponent tries to pass their turn with maybe a couple of forwards. Maybe they can't attack through your forwards, so they just don't attack with them. Or maybe they're on the back foot. They've got 6 points of damage. At the end of their turn, use Onion Knight to play Zeramus onto the field, and now all their forwards are going to go dull. So there's nothing they can do about that unless they can kill Zeramus then and there before their turn ends, which chances are they might not be able to because you've played Zeramus at the very end of their main phase 2. They're going to struggle to get rid of it, which then allows you to be able to push, hopefully. Right, Garland, a 5 CP 9k fire with the text, if you control a forward, of course, 2 or less, Garland gains plus 1,000 power and brave. Pretty boring, to be honest, but and I like to talk about these pretty cheap pauper cards as well, because there are some little synergies that you can use with them, and not everyone has access to Legends and Heroes, so, you know, what can you do with these cards? So, yeah, pretty nondescript, but still usable with other things. So, Aerith, play Aerith onto the field. Aerith will buff Garland by 2k for her own ability, but then his ability will buff him by 1 as well, and he'll also gain Brave. So he'll then become a 12k Brave, which is pretty good. And also Aerith can keep on coming back, which means that Garland will keep on getting buffed as well. Charlotte, so Charlotte again will trigger Garland's buff and give him Brave, but Charlotte has to be targeted, so it might be a case that Garland keeps on attacking with his Brave, which is a problem for your opponent, but they can't get rid of Garland because they have to get rid of Charlotte first, and at damage 3 she also has a kind of protective ability as well, being that she gains more power and also takes less damage. Beatrix, weird saying that in reference to a card now. So yeah, she can reduce Garland's cost, so he becomes a 3k on the field, but also Garland will gain the buff from Beatrix on the field as well. Lastwell, I mean, pretty standard, just keep on playing knights onto the field, and Lastwell will get to keep on freezing things out. That's really nice with Garland's Brave, because you get to keep on having all your forwards standing up, whilst all your opponent's forwards are getting dulled and frozen. Unfortunately, Fire Ice Knights aren't, well, from what I've played, aren't hugely effective, but that doesn't say that they won't be good, and they are still quite fun to use, especially with Lastwell. Lastwell, or all the cheap knights in Fire Ice Knights is quite good. If you can get Lastwell down and then play knight after knight after knight, and freeze out so many of your opponent's cards, that's pretty cool. Noel, so kind of a weird one because Noel can flicker himself out of the game and back in, which means that Garland's power will keep on going up and down, which is weird. So if you are going to attack with Garland, you want to make sure that you do it first before Noel removes himself, because when Noel goes, his power buff and Brave will disappear. But it's a nice way to be able to keep on flickering something out to go searching for something, which is also kind of hard to get rid of for your opponent. They basically only have one trigger, which is you going from your main phase to your attack phase, or technically attack preparation step as well, to be able to get rid of Noel, and therefore to be able to get rid of Garland's ability as well. And Noel's just a pretty decent card. Zidane. So he can't be chosen by your opponent's summons or abilities, so your opponent needs to rely on a board wipe to get rid of Zidane, and he can attack under forwards of cost 4 or more. So a nice way to be able to potentially push those points of damage. Unfortunately, there are lots of ways to be able to deal 3k to the board these days, and Zidane is only a little. So he isn't as playable as he used to be, but still, he is a hard to get rid of forward, which means that Garland may retain his +1 and Brave for a little while at least. Alright, next up we have Quon, a 2CP Lightning backup with the text Pay 1 and Dull. Choose one forward you control until the end of the turn. It gains +2000 power and haste. You can only use this ability if you control only one forward. So kind of a last stand card. Minwoo, make it so that your forward becomes a little bit bigger, and then it can block something, hopefully, if it's the only forward, and then it doesn't take any damage because Minwoo's effect. So your opponent might forget that Quon's effect also gives the +2000 power, which is pretty substantial, to be honest. And then that means that hopefully Minwoo will take effect and your forward won't die. Sabin, so this is more focusing on the damage 5 ability. When Sabin attacks, choose one forward opponent controls, deal damage equal to Sabin's power. So if you're damage 5 and maybe you play Sabin onto the field, you then use Quon's effect, you have paid 5 for Sabin, but then Sabin is a 9k with haste, who will attack, deal 9k to one of your opponent's forwards, and hopefully push opponent damage as well. You can still use Sabin's pay 0 effect to be able to give him first strike, brave, and +2000 power, but he will do your opponent damage. And if you are using Sabin's damage 5 effect, it means that you will then be pushing yourself to 6 damage, so be very careful. Obviously he will be brave, so he'll still be there on your opponent's turn, but still just be careful. Machina. So this is a nice little combo because Machina's cost goes down if you have 2 or less forwards. So hopefully Machina will be your only forward, which means he only costs you 3. And then he also gains Brave, and when Machina attacks, deal 4k to all the forwards opponent controls. You would then use Quon's ability, because Machina is your only forward, to then make him gain +2k and Brave. 2k and haste, sorry, he already gains Brave off his own effect, but you've now got a Brave, what was effectively a 5 CP, Brave, haste, 11k, that'll deal 4k to your opponent's board. Kane, so I think I've mentioned this before, but if you don't control a forward other than Kane, Kane gains +1000 power and haste. So it might be a case that you've got a couple of forwards, you block with the other forward first, it dies, Kane then goes up to +1000 and now haste. Haste doesn't really matter if you're blocking, but then you can use Quon's effect to then give him plus another 2000, so it goes from being a 7k to a 10k, which your opponent might forget about when they're attacking through their forwards. Thancred, so just being able to use his, you might play Thancred onto the field and then use Quon to then give him haste and +2k. You can then use his Blasting Zone S to choose one forward, deal damage equal to Thancred's power. That will be 10k because you gain +2k. Now you have effectively paid, what, 4 CP for Thancred, 1 CP and a Dull for Quon, so that's now 6 CP, then the S for Blasting Zone and Dulling Thancred, which is 8 CP. Not to mention that Thancred is also a card out of your hand. That's pretty expensive, but if it gets rid of a problematic forward, it might be worth it. And it's also in the right element as well, and not to mention the fact that you can keep on using, or when Thancred's already on the field, you can keep on playing Signs of the Seventh Dawn to keep on buffing Thancred, and then use Quon just to give Thancred that buff if you wanted. Obviously, you'd need to do that before you play the other Scions, but then you can make it so his Blasting Zone deals stupid amounts of damage. Cloud of Darkness, you both choose a forward that you want to keep. You're both now down to only one forward, which means you can then use Quon to buff said forward. If it's a forward that came in this turn, like Cloud of Darkness, then you can make it become 2k bigger and haste and attack through. Dorando, so a 3 CP 7k Earth forward. When Durando deals damage to your opponent, choose up to one forward in your break zone and add up to one backup in your break zone, add them to your hand. So really, really cool effect. And then Rebellious Spirit, which is just an S. Till the end of the turn, Durando gains +4000 power, Brave, and Durando cannot be chosen by your opponent's abilities. So obviously the idea is he deals damage to your opponent, you get a Durando S back to hand, and you just keep on doing that so that he keeps on attacking through, and your opponent's either forced to block because they really don't want you getting 2 cards back to hand, or they just, yeah, you keep on getting your S back. Zemus, this is probably a really good case for Zemus to be used because getting not only a point damage done to your opponent, but also getting 2 cards to your hand is a huge swing in your favor. So yeah, Zemus might be worth playing for that. Ovyang and Nedging. So these guys have really cool S abilities and they're pretty cheap to use as well. Just an S for Dispel, so choose one character who loses abilities until the end of the turn, or Shield Bash, which deals 9k something. Both really cool effects. And Durando gets you a forward and a backup, so the forward you're choosing in the break zone could be this card, whilst also having it on the field, and the backup could be either Ovyang or Nedging, because they are both backups from, I think it was Opus 14, maybe? yeah, either way, a cool way to be able to keep on funding Obyang and Mejing's attacks, whilst also probably being able to get them out of the way using their S abilities and allowing Durando to get that point of damage through and getting you cards to hand. Volker. So I really like this card because everyone forgets its S ability is choose one blocking forward, break it. That's any blocking forward. So if you attack with Durando and your opponent blocks with a forward bigger, just use Volker's S and now that forward is broken. Everyone thinks that it's Volker. If Volker is blocked, you get to break that forward. No, any blocking forward, which means you can technically use it on your own forwards as well. If you block with something that you want to sack off, discard Volker's S, you now get to break your own forward. But anyway, yeah, making it so Durando can attack and even if it's blocked, break something, not too shabby. Vincent. Yeah, just keep on getting those S's back to hand and keep on using Vincent's S ability because his Death Gigas or Chaos S abilities do stack. So use Chaos, say twice, he now becomes a 13,000 power forward with first strike, and when he attacks, choose 2 characters, break them. Technically, it's choose 1 character, break it twice, but yeah, and if you can keep on attacking with Durando to keep on getting Vincent's back to hand and then keep on using Vincent's S, I mean, at that point, you pretty much won already, because if Vincent's dealing or breaking even 2 characters on attack, that's pretty gnarly. Kalinka, because Durando can attack twice, hopefully he pushes through and gets you 4 cards to hand, as well as dealing 2 points of damage to your opponent. Nice. Zeramus, yeah, so your opponent will always forget about Zeramus, go to pass turn, oh look, all their forwards go dull, now Durando can attack through without having to worry about anything, aside from, you know, obviously being targeted by summons or abilities, but still, yeah, I know this is over 3 different elements, but again, it's Earth, so Earth is very easy to multicolor, so playing Zeramus shouldn't be too hard at all. Rain, so on your attack phase and your opponent's attack phase, you get to dull something out, so that means you can choose, maybe you play Rain with Durando over there, you get to choose something dull out on your opponent's forward. Sorry, this is all on the prerequisite that you actually remove a monster from your break zone with Rain's entry effect. But yeah, you go to your attack phase, dull something out of the way, pass turn, your opponent's, well, actually that'd be stupid, just on your opponent's attack phase, you dull something out, then you come to your attack phase again and get to dull something out. So you get to dull out a total of 2 things, which isn't too bad. If you're in lightning mode, get to dull or break something else out of the way, which means Durando can attack through and get stuff back to hand. Right, finally we have Princess Sarah, a 1 CP 7k water forward with the text Princess Sarah cannot attack block, and when Princess Sarah is chosen by your summons or abilities, you may draw 1 card. This effect will only trigger during your opponent's turn and only once per turn. So if your opponent's going to try and break Princess Sarah, they're going to try and do it on your turn, but, you know, if she's targeted by any abilities, so include your own as well. So Ash, you can use Ash to make Princess Sarah actually lose her abilities, which means that then she can attack through. So your opponent might forget that, leaving maybe them open to attack, maybe they're on 5 points of damage, they know that Princess Sarah can attack, but they forget that Ash can actually target your own forwards, so then you can attack through with these 2 forwards, as well as potentially giving all your forwards plus 1,000 power as well, water forward, sorry, plus 1,000 power, so Princess Sarah, so actually becomes an 8k as well, which is not too bad. Cactuar, you can dull Cactuar to deal 1,000 damage to Princess Sarah on your opponent's turn, you get to draw a card. Obviously that does then open Princess Sarah open to being killed a bit easier, but you'd have to deal 6k, which is a weird amount to have to deal. Most cards deal either 5 or 7. If they can deal 7, then probably already dead. If they're dealing 5, yeah, either way. But the best thing about this is that if they are doing that to Princess Sarah, chances are they've paid more for their removal of Princess Sarah than you have paid for her anyway. Rosa, whenever a forward you control is chosen by your opponent's summon, you may draw 1 card. So if your opponent does want to get rid of Princess Sarah on their turn, they cast a summon, you get a card from Rosa, and you also get a card from Princess Sarah as well. Celestia, so the water characters you control cannot be broken by opposing summons or abilities that don't deal damage. Chances are your opponent might forget about that ability. Princess Sarah, they try to kill it, you get a card off of Princess Sarah, but actually doesn't die because Celestia's effect. Either way, it makes it a little bit harder for your opponent to kill Princess Sarah with Celestia on the field. Rosa, pay 0, choose 1 forward, activate it. So just on your opponent's turn, choose Princess Sarah, activate her, or she might not be dull, but yeah, either way, activate her, you get a card because she got chosen by an ability. Nice and simple. Leo, so being able to hit Leo's prerequisite of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on the cost of all the cards on your field to be able to even cast Leo is kind of annoying. Now, if I'm being perfectly honest, there are easier ways to get 1 costs onto the field, mostly through the Sarah backup, which can then search you a princess, which you could then play the Princess Sarah light back up, so then you've covered 4 and 1, but then you can also use something like Realm to play a monster of 1 and 2 onto the field, so really this card isn't the best means of doing it, but still, it's a fairly nondescript forward, which your opponent probably won't try and kill immediately, so if you can cover 2 to 6 on your backups and then play Princess Sarah, you can then play Princess Leo, is in King Leo, Christ, I've been saying Princess Sarah too much. Yeah, just be able to hit Leo's prerequisite, basically. Crystal Exarch, you go to attack, or your opponent goes to attack phase, you get to choose Princess Sarah with Crystal Exarch's effect, because again, it triggers on both people's turns, and again, just another way to be able to draw yourself a card for free. And there we go, folks, all done. Yeah, like I said, I'm going to try and pump some more of these videos out a bit now. Obviously, I do have a baby, so they might be a little here and there, but who knows. And I still need to play catch up with all the re-raises that happened recently. I saw some of the stuff that happened in Australia and they look bonkers, but fun, which is what I'm all about. So that's really cool to see that, you know, the meta across the world is actually pretty different from region to region. I mean, this is the thing with meta, especially with a card game like Final Fantasy TCG, because there isn't like something like Magic or Pokemon where it is pretty much a meta across the board. Regions do vary, and even local playgroups vary such a huge amount, but also with such a huge card pool in FFTCG, it means that you can, you know, chop and change things quite a bit. There are so many old cards that actually might come out of the woodwork that people forgot about and actually do some really crazy stuff. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, guys. Stay safe, be lucky, and I'll see you in the next video.